Modern metal music kind of sucks right now. Don't get me wrong. This is the best time in history to be a metal musician or producer. And it's amazing that with a handful of plugins and a laptop, we're capable of getting true professional quality metal mixes right from our bedroom. Unfortunately, that is also the problem because this has led to a massive sea of clones in the metal community, and every mix is kind of starting to sound the same. I know there are absolutely amazing bands out there. There are real innovators underground who are pushing things forward in metal. But if you just go on Spotify or TikTok or SiriusXM on the Octane channel, for instance, you're going to hear a ton of music that sounds literally identical. And when I was starting out, I was making a lot of these mistakes myself. I was learning from YouTube tutorials and I was applying those techniques into my workflow without realizing that I was sucking all of the life out of my metal mixes, and I was making it impossible for my mixes to stand out in a huge sea of music that sounded kind of the same. So if there's any chance that you might be making those same mistakes, we're going to fix that today. We're going to focus on what some of the top offenders are in this kind of modern metal sameness that we're hearing out there on the radio. And we're going to break down specific and actionable techniques that you can take away and start mixing with today to help your mix stand out and really get to the next level in your craft. I'm Dave. I'm the lead producer and the owner at Very Friendly Studios, Brooklyn's new home for heavy music. We're right in the middle of building out our brand new studio space, and I'm doing a video series from right here in the bedroom where I first learned the craft of mixing. So today, let's focus on bad habits that are sucking the life out of modern metal and what we can do about them. Okay, so let's get started with modern metal bad habit number 1, too many EQ moves. Have you ever wound up here when you were EQing a track? Cuts all over the place. We all have been here before. EQ plugins have opened up limitless possibilities, but as a result, many modern metal producers are cutting out the grit that makes different metal bands truly unique. In my opinion, it's the job of a good producer to really get out of the way, find the thing that makes the band unique, that makes the guitarist unique in how they play and how they sound, and focus on clearing the clutter away that isn't that. The goal is not to shape the sound so completely and surgically that it sounds like every other guitar part, is to find the thing that makes that guitar part unique. So let's take a look at a track in real time and play with the EQ so I can show you exactly what I mean. So here's a little thrashy part of a song that I'm working on that has quad-tracked rhythm guitars. Let's just give it a listen with no EQ on the track that we're going to work on to start. Okay, so I know that I want to apply some EQ here. I'm going to pull up FabFilter Q3. This is my EQ plugin of choice. And let's just see what the frequency spectrum is doing here for a second. So as you can see, we have a little bit of a scoop there. We have a lot of bite happening in the 2000 to 2500 hertz range. And let's talk about the first way that this bad habit tends to show up. And this is with where you put the low pass. So one of the great things about having visual EQ is you can literally see every micro detail of where the frequency spectrum is active. Unfortunately, this has led to a very bad habit, in my opinion, among metal producers who are mixing guitar, and that's bringing that low pass way too low so that it hugs the frequency that you're seeing in the EQ plugin. So if I were to do that, here's what I would do. And you might be thinking, that sounds good. That's modern metal. You brought the hiss out and now the guitar is sounding articulate. But this is actually not how the best mixers and engineers and producers do it. Just go watch Jens Bogren, who in my opinion is one of the best producers of all time. Watch how he applies EQ. What he knows and what I've learned is that by cutting this entire range out from 7200 and above, you're cutting out a lot of the information that is really making this guitar sound like this guitar. In fact, I've found much better results moving this low pass out a little bit, bringing some of that hiss and that distortion and that snarl back into the guitar track. Let's play with it for a little bit and see where we get. So you can hear as I start to open that up a little bit, you're getting a lot more aggression back in the guitar tone. And this is going to help you avoid falling into the trap of the modern cookie cutter deathcore rhythm guitar. I like to have this low pass fairly high up so that I'm capturing that screech. And I might even boost a little bit to accentuate it. You hear how that bite has elevated? Let's A/B it now. To my ears, that sounds way better. And part of the reason I think it sounds way better is because it sounds like guitar actually sounds. If you're watching a band perform live, this is what you're going to hear. You're not going to hear a perfectly trimmed EQ curve that's removing any hint of that hiss on the top end. Let's look at another common area that EQ is getting overused in modern metal, and that's the low-mid scoop. So let's play again and just look at this frequency spectrum. You're going to see that because of how I dialed this amp, there's already a good scoop happening in that low-mid area. And there seems to be this general thought in modern metal that low mids are bad, that you always have to cut low mids, that low mids are always going to make the mix muddy. And if you're not careful, you're going to take all of the meat out of this guitar. I'll show you exactly what I mean. You can see this frequency curve is kind of scooped already. We're seeing it dip here in the 400 hertz or so range. And a lot of times what I've seen with modern mixers is they'll look at this and without even really listening to it carefully, they're going to go straight to the low mids and cut them because that's what they've been conditioned to do, because that's where they believe they're going to be able to take out the mud. Now watch what happens. I'm going to hit play again and I'm going to make a dip on that low mid region. And what you're going to hear is you're going to hear all of the gravitas get sucked out of this guitar track. You're going to hear it become lifeless and turn into a sound that isn't the sound that I'm looking for when I'm listening to metal. I want this thing to be dangerous and heavy, right? Watch what happens here. And I hear this in a lot of mixes. It sounds almost like you're listening to it on like Walkman headphones. It's so trebly that you've lost all of the definition that really made this thing heavy to begin with. And sometimes what I'll do, especially when I'm using a high gain amp like this one, is I'll boost the low mids because I want that aggression and that intensity. And I'm actually okay with a little bit of muddiness if it means that this doesn't sound like hospital precise sanitized metal. Watch when I boost a little bit here. Let's try it in context. Hear how thick that low end is? If I was just running the Model Metal Production Techniques playbook, I would have dipped in an area that I actually should be boosting. And this is really limiting the results that people can get with their EQ, because once you start messing with this, it's a slippery slope and you very quickly wind up with 1,000 cuts like the example we just looked at. So that's the bad habit, getting way too crazy with the EQ and making too many moves. What is the good technique? I promised I would give you some actionable takeaways. Here's one that I really like. Limit yourself in how many EQ moves you're going to allow yourself to do on any given track. Let's say that I'm only going to give myself 3 EQ moves max on every guitar track that I have. I've already made 2 of them. The only thing really left to do here is a high pass. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And then I'm going to call this track done and I'm going to move on with my mix. The longer you mess with a track, the worse it's going to become. You want to trust your instincts, listen to when it sounds heavy, and then move on to the next one. Sounds pretty good to me. Technique number 1, barely enough EQ, bare minimum EQ to achieve results on a given track. Bad habit number 2, compression for aggression. One signature trait of what I think is bad modern metal is that it's always compressed into a pancake. You hear compression on the guitar track, the guitar bus, the drum bus, the vocals are slammed, the synths, compression everywhere. Compression is an excellent tool and it should be applied with force in some areas, but in other areas, it really shouldn't be applied at all. So we're going to focus entirely on guitar and we're going to go back to that same guitar track that we were just working on. So here we have that same guitar track we were just working on. I've added another EQ plugin later in the chain and I put a compressor plugin right before it. I'm using Pro C. I like FabFilter plugins. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to let this track run And I want you to look at the frequency spectrum on the left in the EQ plugin and watch what happens when I engage the compressor plugin. What you're going to see is that it's going to jump down slightly. And then if you listen really closely, you're going to hear that the meat has been removed from that track, and it's going to sound like it's just the bones. So I'm going to engage the track here, and then I'm going to add the compressor plugin. I'll turn it on and off a couple times so you can hear what I'm talking about. So I'm doing it with fairly dramatic compression, but it's to prove a point. You can really hear how the life is getting pulled out of the track when it gets over-tamed by the compressor. So why is that happening on the guitars and not on other instruments? The thing with guitar is that metal guitar is high gain, and gain is actually already compressing the signal. So when you think about what a compressor does, it's essentially taking those peaks on the signal and it's just gently pushing them down to create less dynamic range in the track. This serves a purpose for a lot of things. It keeps the vocals audible at all portions of the song, but it's also just trimming out some of the intensity, right? And if you look at what gain and distortion do, they're actually achieving that same result. This is why when you fuzz a guitar way out, you lose a little bit of that dynamic range. So in a sense, it's already compressed. And when I apply the compression on top of that, it's now becoming over compressed, which is what I typically hear in what I think are bad modern metal mixes. So how much compression do I put on electric guitars? I put 0 on electric guitars. I really try to avoid compressing the electric guitars at all. I might apply a small amount on the bus, and we'll look at that in a moment, but that shouldn't really be compressing anything. It should just be gluing things together. So this is an area that modern metal mixes suffer a lot. Compression does not equal aggression, and the technique to apply here is actually to compress way less than you think. So let's shift our focus over to the guitar bus now, and I'll show you what I mean. So now we're going to work on the rhythm guitar bus. I have 4 individual rhythm guitar tracks, quad tracked, that are getting sent to one rhythm guitar bus. This is the only area on guitar that I would ever consider applying compression. In fact, I'm probably not going to in this mix, but I'll show you how to compress the bus just in case you feel like you really need to. So I love the API 2500 compressor. This is my favorite bus compressor by far. And what I'm going to do with this is I'm going to first dial it to the gentlest setting almost imaginable, right? So I have the thresh knee is on the softest setting. The thrust detector is on the softest setting. The tone type is old, which is much gentler and less aggressive than new. And if you look over at my dials here, you'll see that I have attack at absolutely the longest, and I have release at absolutely the shortest. So what this is doing is it means that the compressor is waiting as long as possible before it even starts to take effect, and then it's going to let go as quickly as possible, effectively limiting the amount of compression pretty dramatically that can be applied. And what I'm then going to do is I'm going to dial the threshold until literally the needle is starting to move, maximum 1 decibel of gain reduction. So what that means is I'm not really actually compressing this. I'm just using this compressor to apply the color that I get from this plugin so that it starts to sound like all 4 rhythm guitar tracks are existing in the same room. So let's play it with no compression. I'll turn it on with the threshold dialed all the way down, and then I'm going to slowly dial it up until I'm seeing 1 decibel of gain reduction or less. And what you're going to hear is the guitars are not going to lose their gravitas the way they did when we applied compression on the track, but they are going to sit a little more cohesively in the mix. And that's really what I'm trying to do here. Literally like that much. And what you can hear if you're listening carefully is you can hear the aggression dial up maybe 2% and just a little more cohesion when I apply compression. That's really what I want, a very gentle impact. I'll hit it one more time with no compressor and then engage it so you can hear what I'm talking about. Compress less. For the last demonstration on bad habit number 2, compression for aggression, I want to jump over to the mix bus. I've seen a lot of content out there on YouTube that is pushing for pretty aggressive compression on the mix bus, and that's because a lot of modern metal is doing that. But I want to just show you an alternative point of view here so you can hear what the difference is when you're not controlling your mix quite as much. So I'm using the API 2500 again. Like I said, it's my favorite bus compressor. I also have it in my mix bus chain. And take a look at how I have it dialed. The ratio is on literally the lowest possible setting. It's on 1.5, a 1.5 to 1 compressor ratio. The release is still the fastest possible release. The attack is still the slowest possible attack. I do like the loud setting on the thrust detector for the mix bus, but you're going to see this is really doing almost no compressing. All it's doing is gluing this thing together. Now, the content that I've seen elsewhere is really promoting a higher ratio. In fact, a lot of videos will tell you that you should have your mix bus ratio all the way up at 4:1. So what I'm just going to do is I'm going to show you what this exact compressor on this mix sounds like at 4:1, and watch what happens when I bring it back to 1.5. What I hope you're going to hear is you're going to hear the song move out of that really kind of boxed in octane core style modern metal sound, and you're going to hear some pissed off aggression coming back into this mix. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to hit play, and then you'll see me dial this ratio down, and you can hear what's happening to the mix. So you might have smoother dynamics. You might be able to keep your song pinned perfectly at -14 LUFS so that it's optimized for Spotify and et cetera, by pinning your mix bus at a 4:1 ratio. But you're going to lose the heart and the spirit of what makes metal metal, in my opinion. So that's what I like to do with compression. I really like to, just like with EQ, use just enough, barely enough compression. So if you're trying to get aggression through compression, you might be surprised at what happens if you just compress less. Bad habit 3, quantize everything. I get it, the button's right there. It's very tempting to edit a lot of stuff in your song all at once simply by snapping it to the grid. And when you listen to modern metal, you'll hear that. Most, if not all, the notes across all the instruments are snapped into the grid and quantized. But go listen to the metal that created metal. Listen to early Slayer. Listen to Metallica, Master of Puppets. Listen to Death records. Are those songs snapped to the grid? Hell no, they couldn't snap them to the grid. Now, I get it. There might be big things that you need to edit out manually in your tracks, but you should just find the big things and edit those out manually. By doing one fell swoop where you're snapping every note to the grid, you're removing all those little imperfections that really make the musician and the songs that they write unique. So for this, let's take a listen to a black metal song that I'm working on. And I want to look at black metal through this lens specifically because black metal is a genre that should be all over the place. The notes shouldn't be perfectly neat and tidy. It should feel like you're wandering through a haze of swirling music that's kind of drawing you in, right? So I'm going to show you what this song sounds like with no quantization, and then I'll show it to you with quantization. And what you'll hear is that we're losing something essential in that process. First, let's just listen to a snippet of this song, and I'll toggle on and off soloing the guitar bus. This is not quantized, and I just want you to hear what it sounds like in its natural state as the notes were played. So you can hear the notes are kind of washing over you. You're sort of getting bathed in these kind of random guitar notes. And that is, I think, what black metal should sound like. Now watch what happens when I quantize those tracks and play the same snippet again. It's subtle, but that's just a little too precise to me. It feels a little too much manufactured in a lab, built in the box. It doesn't sound as much like I'm standing in a room with the most evil black metal band of all time. And that's really what I'm looking for in my metal. And that's something that I think modern metal is actually hurting. So if you're quantizing too much, the best technique is to not quantize at all. Like I said, don't apply quantization as a blanket rule. Don't apply quantization anywhere. Instead, make manual tweaks where you feel it's absolutely necessary and let the natural mistakes fall into the mix wherever they will outside of that. And finally, bad habit number 4, robotic amp sims. Amp sims are an amazing tool. They've never been better. They're nearly perfect. And every big name producer that you can think of, people that I really look up to like Will Putney and Dave Otero, are absolutely using amp sims in their workflow. However, the fact that they're so perfect is also their problem, because when you're recording live music and you're recording with a high gain amp in the room, that thing is going to be extremely noisy. It's going to sound different depending on where it's placed in the room. It's going to sound different depending on the room that it's placed in. And all of those little differences create unique tones and unique identities in the sounds of the bands that we all love. The problem with the amp sim is it doesn't have those variances. If you apply an amp sim plugin in your signal chain and you use it out of the box and you use the impulse responses that it comes with, then you're going to get a tone that sounds just like everybody else using that plugin. The good news is it's actually very, very easy to fix this. So we're going to jump back into a project. We're going to listen to a couple rhythm guitar tracks, and I'm going to show you the squeaky clean robotic amp sim version and the couple changes that you can make to the exact same track to achieve that untamed, feral, live in the studio quality. So here we are in the project. I've hidden all the extraneous tracks, and as you can see, I have the exact same guitar track duped here. I have one that's the tidy robotic amp sim version, and I have one that's the dirty, real studio kind of live sounding take. And I'm going to show you the difference in sound between the two, and then I'll show you exactly how I'm achieving it. So let's give a listen to the amp sim out the box first. That's the tidy track here. As you can see, I'm using the Fortin Nameless plugin. I love Neural DSP's plugins. I'm not sponsored by them. I just think that they're amazing. And a lot of the tutorial content that you're going to watch is going to be using them because they are truly world-class. However, if you just plug them in and you dial the amp, however you dial the amp, and then you use the built-in cab simulator here where you have, these different microphones to choose from and you just situate them against the cab, you're going to get a very clinical and sterile sound. So this is what the guitar sounds like with just that Fortin Nameless plugin with the right out of the box impulse responses. And as you can see, all I have here is that Nameless plugin. So this is what that sounds like. Okay, definitely doesn't sound bad. It sounds good even. But it's missing something that when you add these tracks up, you kind of realize is absent when you arrive at that final mix. So now let's listen to the dirty track, and then I'll talk you through exactly what I'm doing there. Let me just quickly toggle back and forth so you can hear the difference here. So here's tidy. And now here is dirty. So what's happening in the dirty track that's not happening in the tidy track? We're getting squeaks and pops. We're getting hiss. We're getting a higher degree of distortion and maybe some more, harmonic saturation happening in the high end. And we're doing that in two very straightforward ways. The first is I'm going to pull up the Fortin Nameless plugin. I'll actually pull them both up side by side so I can just show you how we're doing this. So on the left, I'm using a blend of microphones, a common blend, right? I have the 57 on the left and I have the 121 on the right. And that's giving me a mix of kind of high bite, high gain, high-end guitar and, a woodier low end, which is very common in modern metal. So on the right side, I'm actually using exactly the same blend of microphones, but I'm doing it with an impulse response. So here I have the York Audio impulse response loaded up for the Mesa Boogie rectifier cab. And as you can see here, I'm using the exact same pair of mics. I'm using the 57 and the 121. The difference between the stock impulse response on the left and the York Audio impulse response on the right is the one on the right just sounds like it was really recorded in a live room. It has more of those imperfections that make that guitar sound like it was recorded live. And that's getting me a lot of the way. Using a really good IR, when I started using IRs instead of the stock microphones that just came with the plugin, I started achieving a much more organic sound. And then finally, the secret weapon on the dirty track is this plugin from Bogren Digital that I absolutely love called IRDX Core. And I'm not 100% sure what those guys built into this plugin, but what I know is that it's adding a lot of that aggression and that noise and that pop and kind of those live in the studio imperfections that amp sims are taking out. So it's subtle, but I'll show you what it sounds like disengaged, and then I'll engage it, and you can hear what this plugin is doing to add some of that intensity back in. You can hear that it's just starting to scream a little bit more. So very simple. If you have robotic sounding amp sims, and by the way, if you're using amp sims exactly as they are out of the box, and you're using the microphones and cabinets that they come with, that is the sound that you have. You can very easily fix it by finding a really good impulse response. I highly recommend the York Audio series, and by throwing this bad boy on the end of your signal chain, the IRDX plugin. EQ, compression, amp sims, none of these are the bad guy. These are absolutely essential tools that every producer is going to need to have in their arsenal. The problem is when you start using these tools as shortcuts rather than as the instruments they were intended to be, that's when the humanity starts to leave modern metal. You shouldn't be trying to erase the fingerprints. You should be trying to let the fingerprints shine. Those fingerprints are what make the music truly unique. And if you think back to those bands we talked about earlier, Slayer, Metallica, Death, Gorguts, you name it, their mixes are not perfect. They are absolutely imperfect, which is what's letting the human and aggressive soul shine through them. So hopefully you learned something today. If you did, if you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe to support the channel, and stay tuned for more from Very Friendly Studios.